Um, First, I'd like to join everybody in saying thanking the School of Advanced International Studies and Professor Wedgwood and Tiffany for organizing such a great event. And also like to thank all the other panelists. I mean, it's really exciting to be on such a panel of people who fit well together so many of the pieces of the cholera puzzle. And it's great to be on the panel, and I really look forward to a broader discussion with everybody in the room. I'd like to talk briefly about our case in a narrow sense, and then talk a little bit about what we're thinking about the case's impact on the broader scale. Our case was formally filed with the United Nations itself rather than with any court. And the reason for that is that the UN has an agreement called the Status of Forces Agreement, usually known by the acronym SOFA, with the Haitian government that provides UN personnel and the mission with protection from jurisdiction by Haitian courts. And there's obviously good reasons for that. If especially in a situation where a UN mission is in a politically charged area, people could abuse the justice system as a way of preventing the UN from doing its very important work. And so we don't oppose the immunity provision per se, and also the immunity provision in Haiti's SOFA is the same one that's in almost every SOFA for the 60 years of UN peacekeeping. Where our problem is not with immunity, but with impunity. And the difference is actually recognized in the SOFA itself, because the SOFA gives the UN immunity, but it recognizes that impunity isn't good for anybody, and so it puts an obligation on the UN to create an alternative mechanism for handling claims of injury by its employees. The major part of that mechanism is something called the Standing Claims Commission. Now, the Standing Claims Commission, despite fairly consistent accusations of large-scale wrongdoing by MINUSTA over the last 8 years, that Standing Claims Commission has never been set up. It's also never been set up in over 60 years of UN peacekeeping. So what our lawsuit does, we filed on behalf of 5,000 victims of cholera, and what our lawsuit does, we asked for three things. We asked for the clean water projects that Rishi mentioned that are necessary to control the epidemic, compensation to people who've lost everything they have from the cholera, and an apology. And what we've said is, we're putting the ball in the UN's court. Yes, you have protection from Haitian courts, but you also have an obligation to provide an alternative mechanism. And we say the ball's in your court if you do not establish an adequate mechanism. Then we're going to go into a national court and convince the national court to decline to enforce the immunity provision and allow us to have a national court proceeding. We're doing on two levels at once. We're working on putting together the case for a UN internal mechanism, but we're also working on preparing cases that could be submitted to the U.S., Haitian, or European courts. And as part of that, we're doing the research to figure out which would be the best venue for our clients. In terms of what the UN has done in response, so we filed on November 4th of 2011. On December 21st, the UN Office of Legal Affairs sent us a 3-sentence letter saying they received the complaints and that they will respond in due time. And apparently due time is more than 7 months because we've not received another communications from them since then. And so we're continuing to do our work on preparing the cases. But although we think in terms of technical professional responsibility terms, our clients are 5,000, the 5,000 people that we filed complaints for, we also feel a moral relationship with all of Haitians, especially Haitians who have not been sick yet and are vulnerable to cholera. And so we feel a large part of our work is working for the clean water projects that will hopefully make people that never become eligible for us to represent them because they never get cholera. But beyond that, we also think that this that this case, as Mario mentioned, that we're doing the case for the poor throughout the world, because there's unfortunately a fairly long and distressing history of impunity by UN peacekeeping missions. And in that sense, in that broader sense, our fight is not really against the UN as an organization. The fight is really against the UN's impunity addiction. And I'll join Professor Wedgwood in saying that I agree that the UN does a lot of important things. I agree enough that I served as a UN volunteer in Haiti in 1995 and 1996. But it does have an impunity addiction, and some of the evidence for that addiction is the failure to test that Jonathan and Rishi mentioned, test the peacekeepers, the failure to adequately maintain the waste disposal, the failure to even do a decent cover-up. I mean, anybody who, they knew a couple days before Jonathan was out that they were being accused of causing the epidemic. They spent their time issuing denials. They didn't spend their time trying to hide the pipe of the sewage going right out into there. And I think that a lot of what they've been doing since then, that Rishi and Jonathan mentioned, that are fairly disingenuous attempts to exculpate themselves, or at least clumsy attempts. It's the clumsiness that comes from not ever having to seriously do this. Because they're not used to being called to account, and so they don't even know how to do a cover-up or to adequately defend themselves, other than the one defense that works is, we're going to deny you any access to justice. And we're hoping to make this the one case that overcomes, that helps the UN get beyond the impunity addiction. They always say the first step to dealing with an addiction is to recognize that you have a problem. With the cholera case, President Bill Clinton, who's the UN Special Envoy to Haiti, he admitted back in March, he said that UN troops were the proximate cause of the cholera epidemic. That's a fairly strong admission that the UN was responsible for the cholera. And also on a broader level, there have been commissions, reports, studies, task forces, a whole line of UN efforts from within the UN to come to terms with this. I mean, it's fairly universally recognized within the UN system that they have an impunity problem. The challenge has been to move beyond the recognition of the problem to taking some action. And I think the reason why that's been a challenge is that actually taking action on this problem requires a lot of hard decisions. One of them is of course financial. If the UN admits that it's responsible for cholera, it's going to have to pay to put in the clean water to stop the cholera. It's going to have to pay to compensate our victims, and potentially the 5,000 that we represent, but there's also, I think it's over 600,000 now and counting other Haitians who have suffered from cholera. But on the broader level, there's a problem, because if the UN starts becoming accountable for these things, that's going to set a precedent which will require the UN to be more careful in avoiding harm to people in its host countries, and down the line pay compensation to people injured by rape by peacekeepers, by negligent siting of refugee camps, by a whole range of things that the UN has been doing without having to pay any consequences to. So I think that this is that what we're hoping to do is to help. That this will be the not quite the straw that breaks the camel's back, but whatever is needed to push the UN over the hump to start really grappling in a constructive way with its impunity and addiction. And one thing I think that's really important to recognize here is that, of course, as you can see in David and Bryn's eloquent film, cholera is a horrible tragedy in Haiti, but it also presents an opportunity to do a great amount of good. If the UN does, in fact, accept responsibility and puts in the clean water that is necessary to control the epidemic, it will save thousands of lives. Our best estimate is about 5,000 lives every year, year after year. Not only will it save lives lost from cholera, which last year was about 7,000. This year, I think the estimates are 2,000 to 4,000. But there's also another 3,000 to 4,000 lives lost every year, mostly kids, from non-cholera infectious diseases and non-cholera waterborne diseases in Haiti. And so if you put in the clean water to stop the cholera, you're going to stop a lot of other infectious diseases. And within a few years, you're going to save more people than have died from cholera. And so in a sense, you've got what we call a platinum lining to the cholera program, where in the end, you'll be saving more lives than have been lost by cholera. And so we just think this is an excellent opportunity for the UN to take advantage of that. We also think it's an excellent opportunity for the U.S. to play a leadership role in making that happen. And one of the things that we're very excited to have, and I think there's some handouts outside, is just yesterday, Representative John Conyers' office announced that they had collected 104 signatures of members of the House of Representatives on a letter to Susan Rice, who's the U.S. ambassador to the UN, urging her to make sure that the UN lives up to its own standards in responding to cholera. Thank you.